My uncle wrote me into his will for $2.3 million, then died 3 weeks later. His daughter showed up at the funeral with a lawyer and a recording that proved I coerced him. She got me arrested for elder abuse. I just found out why she needed me gone. The funeral was small. Uncle Ray had outlived most of his friends, and the few cousins who came spent more time on their phones than listening to the service. I sat in the third row, still numb. 3 weeks ago, he'd been eating soup in his kitchen, telling me about the vintage motorcycle he wanted to restore. Then pneumonia, then gone. I was folding my program when I saw her. Vanessa, Ray's daughter. We hadn't spoken in 6 years, not since she'd screamed at him for lending me money for community college. She walked straight past me like I was furniture, her heels clicking on the chapel floor. A man in a gray suit followed her, carrying a briefcase. After the service, as people gathered in the church basement for coffee and dry cookies, Vanessa cornered me near the coat rack. "We need to talk. I'm sorry for your loss," I said, because that's what you say, even when the person clearly doesn't want condos, save it. She nodded at the man in gray. "This is Roger Finch, my attorney. We have reason to believe you manipulated my father into changing his will." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" Roger opened his briefcase and pulled out a document. 3 weeks before his death, Raymond Colfax executed a new will naming you, his niece Jenna, as primary beneficiary of his estate, valued at approximately $2.3 million. You visited him regularly during the months preceding this change. "I visited him because he was alone," I said. "You hadn't been to see him in over a year." Vanessa's face hardened. "I was busy. I have a career, and now it turns out you were busy too." Busy whispering in his ear, turning him against his own daw. "That's insane. Ray made his own decisions, did he?" Roger pulled out a phone and tapped the screen. "We have a recording that suggests otherwise." He pressed play. My uncle's voice came through the speaker, thin and tired. "I don't know, Jenna. It feels like too much. You don't need to keep coming by." Then my voice. "But Uncle Ray, you promised. You said you'd take care of me. You said family takes care of family." More of Ray's voice, confused now. "I just think maybe Vanessa should. She's my daughter." And me again, sharper. "After everything I've done for." "Wanda, all those visits, all that time you owe me. The blood drained from my face. That's not, I never said those things. That's edited, is it?" Vanessa crossed her arms. "Because it sounds pretty clear to me. You pressured a sick old man into giving you his money. Your father had pneumonia for 4 days. He wasn't sick when he changed the will. He was completely lucid. Lucid enough to cut out his only child for a niece he barely knew." Vanessa's voice rose. "You preyed on him. You isolated him from his real fan." "You isolated yourself," I shot back. "You moved to Chicago and forgot he existed." Roger stepped between us. "Emmett Colfax, we're prepared to contest the will on grounds of undue influence and elder abuse. But if you'd like to avoid a lengthy court battle, we can discuss a settlement." "A set?" I stared at him. "I didn't do anything wrong." "Then you'll have no problem explaining it to the police." Vanessa pulled out her own phone. "I've already filed a report. They're very interested in your pattern of behavior." "What pat?" "I visited my uncle. I brought him groceries. I kept him company." "You isolated him." Vanessa ticked off on her fingers. "You controlled his access to other family members. You manipulated him into changing legal documents in your favor. And you did it all while he was vulnerable and alone. That's textbook elder abuse." My hands started shaking. "This is insane. Ray wanted me to have that money. He told me he was changing the will. He said you'd already gotten your inheritance early, that he paid for your law school and your wedding and your house down payment. He said this was his way of evening things out." "Convenient story," Roger said. "Do you have any proof of these conversations?" "They were private conversations with my uncle." "Why would I record them?" "Exactly." Vanessa's smile was razor thin. "No proof. Just your word against evidence of coercion." "That recording is fake," I said. "Anyone can edit audio. You can't seriously thin. The police will determine what's real." Vanessa said, "I expect they'll want to talk to you soon, Roger. Let's go." They left me standing in the church basement, holding a paper cup of bad coffee, my mind racing. This couldn't be happening. Ray had been clear about the will. He'd sat me down in his kitchen 4 months ago and explained everything. how Vanessa had already received over $400,000 in gifts and loans over the years, how he wanted to be fair, how he'd watched me work 2 jobs to get through school while his daughters spent his money on vacation homes. I drove home in a daze. My apartment felt too small, the walls pressing in. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old texts, with Ray mostly check-ins. How are you feel? Need anything from the store? Want me to bring din? Nothing that proved what he'd said about the will. Nothing that would stand up against a recording, fake or not. The police came 2 days later. 2 detectives, a man and a woman, both wearing expressions of professional concern. They asked to come in. I let them. We're investigating allegations of elder abuse, the woman said. Her name was Detective Marsh. Specifically, allegations that you coerced Raymond Colfax into changing his will. I didn't coerce anyone, I said. My uncle made his own decision. Can you describe your relationship with Mr. Colfax? The male detective asked. His badge said Romay. I told them how I'd started visiting after my aunt died 3 years ago, how Ray had been lonely and I'd had time, how we'd watched baseball games and played cards and talked about everything and nothing. And you were aware he was a wealthy man, Marsh said. Not a question. I knew he was comfortable. He'd had a successful business. Did you ever discuss money with him? Sometimes he'd mention bills or property taxes, normal things. Did you ever ask him for money? Once he offered to help with my tuition, and I accepted. He gave me $8,000 my junior year. Romero made a note, and 3 months later, he changed his will to name you primary beneficiary. That's not why he changed it. He changed it because Vanessa hadn't visited in over a year, because he felt like she only called when she needed something, because he wanted to be fair about what he'd given each of us over the year. That's your interpretation, Marsh said. His daughter has a different perspective. His daughter is lying. Strong accusation, Romero said. Can you prove it? I couldn't, that was the problem. I had texts and memories and the knowledge that Ray had loved me, had wanted to help me. But none of that meant anything against a recording and a grieving daughter's testo. They asked more questions about my visits, my relationship with Vanessa, what Ray had said about the will. I answered honestly, watching their faces stay neutral and unreadable. We'll be in touch, Marsh said as they left. Don't leave town. The next week was a nightmare. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept spinning. I needed a lawyer, but lawyers cost money I didn't have. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was accused of stealing millions. I couldn't access, while I couldn't afford to defend myself. I called the attorney who'd handled Ray's will, a local guy named Peter Santos. He sounded tired when I explained the situation. I can testify that Ray was of sound mind when he signed the documents, Peter said, but a will contest is expensive and messy, and if there are criminal charges, that's outside my scope. Can they really prosecute me? I didn't do anything. Elder abuse laws are broad, he said carefully. If they can prove you exercised undue influence, yes, the recording doesn't help. The recording is fake. Can you prove that? I couldn't. Not without money for a forensic audio expert, not without resources I didn't have. Peter gave me the name of a criminal defense attorney and wished me luck. The attorney, Gloria Chin, agreed to meet me for a free consultation. Her office was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. She listened to my story, her face giving nothing away, then leaned back in her chair. The recording is your biggest problem, she said. Even if it's edited, proving that in court requires expert analysis. We're talking $5,000, minimum, maybe more. I don't have that, I figured. She tapped her pen against her desk. The other problem is motive. You're a 28-year-old community college graduate working retail. He's a wealthy man with no other close family. The prosecution will paint a very clear picture of opportunity and incentive. But I didn't do it. I believe you. But belief doesn't win cases. Evidence does. And right now, the evidence favors Vanessa's narrative. She paused. There's something else you should know. If they charge you with elder abuse and it sticks, you could face jail time. More importantly, you'll be disqualified from inheriting under the will. There's a statute that prevents anyone convicted of abusing an elderly person from benefiting from that person's estate. The room felt colder. So, even if I fight this and lose, I get nothing. Worse than nothing. You get a criminal record and legal debt. I left her office feeling hollow. The sun was too bright, the traffic too loud. Everything felt surreal. Like I'd stepped sideways into someone else's life. A life where I was a villain, a predator, someone who'd manipulate a dying man for money. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying conversations with Ray, searching for something I'd missed, some hint that this was coming, but there was nothing. He'd been happy those last months, excited about the will, about finally doing something to balance the scales with Vanessa. He talked about how she'd always been able to guilt him into giving her money, and how this was his way of taking back control. The nut came at 7 in the morning. Detective Marsh and Romero again, but this time with uniforms behind them. Jenna Colfax, you're under arrest for financial exploitation of an elderly person and elder abuse. The handcuffs were cold. The ride to the station was silent. I kept thinking this couldn't be real, that someone would realize the mistake, that Gloria would swoop in and fix everything, but Gloria wasn't there. I was processed and fingerprinted and photographed like a criminal because, according to the state, that's where I was. The bail hearing was a blur. The prosecutor argued I was a flight risk, that I had motive to disappear now that my scheme had been discovered. Gloria argued I had no criminal record, no passport, a steady job. The judge set bail at $50,000. I didn't have $50,000, I didn't have $5,000. I sat in a cell with gray walls and a metal toilet and tried not to cry. My best friend Marcus bailed me out 2 days later. He'd emptied his savings account and borrowed from his parents. People who barely knew me. I hugged him in the parking lot and couldn't find words big enough to say thank you. We'll figure this out, he said. You didn't do this. The truth has to matter. I wanted to believe him, but the truth was I'd visited Ray regularly. The truth was he'd changed his will in my favor. The truth was I'd benefited from his loneliness and his estrangement from his daughter. None of those truths were illegal, but together they painted a picture that looked exactly like what Vanessa was claiming. Gloria filed motions. The prosecutor filed responses. Everything moved slowly, grinding forward while my life fell apart around the edges. My manager at the store was sympathetic but firm. Too much time off, too much drama. I was let go. Marcus let me sleep on his couch. I applied for jobs and watched them evaporate when background checks came back with pending charges. 3 weeks after my arrest, Gloria called with news. The prosecution is offering a plea deal. Plead guilty to attempted financial exploitation, and they'll drop the elder abuse charge. You'd get probation, maybe community service, no jail time. But I didn't do it. I know, but trials are expensive and unpredictable. Juries hear inheritance and lonely old men, and they make assumptions. If you lose, you're looking at 2 years minimum. With the plea, you walk away and lose the inherit. You were never getting that inheritance, Jenna, not with Vanessa contesting. The civil case alone would drag on for years. This way, at least you avoid prison. I told her I'd think about it. But what was there to think about? I could fight and risk everything, or I could surrender and lose everything except my freedom, some choice. That night on Marcus's couch, I opened my laptop and started digging. If the recording was fake, there had to be evidence, software artifacts, inconsistencies, something. I downloaded audio editing programs and watched YouTube tutorials on forensic analysis. I felt ridiculous and desperate and determined. The recording Vanessa had played was on my phone. Roger had sent it to Gloria as part of discovery. I loaded it into an audio editor and started examining the waveforms. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew something had to be there. Hours passed. Marcus came home from work, ordered pizza, went to bed. I kept staring at the screen, zooming in on peaks and valleys, looking for cuts or splices or anything that proved manipulation. Around 2 a.m., I found something, a tiny discontinuity in the background. Noise, right before my voice, said, "You owe me." The hum of Ray's refrigerator cut out for a fraction of a second, then resumed at a slightly different. It wasn't much. It might not even be enough. But it was Senpai called Gloria in the morning. I found an edit in the recording, a splice point. "We can prove it's fake," she sighed. "Jenna, I appreciate your initiative, but audio analysis isn't something you can do on a laptop. We'd need a certified expert to testify, and we're back to the money problem. What if I could find the original files? If Vanessa edited it, she had to do it somewhere. She'd need software, source files, maybe backups in the cloud. That's speculation. And even if you're right, how would you access her files, break into her house, hack her compute, because both of those are crimes? There has to be another way. There isn't, Gloria's voice softened. I know this feels impossible, but sometimes the system fails good people. Sometimes the best option is to cut your losses and move on. I hung up and stared at Marcus's ceiling. Cut my losses, plead guilty to something I didn't do, carry that conviction forever, let Vanessa win. The thought made me sick, but what choice did I have? I spent the next few days in a fog, went through the motions of living while my mind churned through scenarios and dead ends. I thought about Ray, about what he'd want me to do. Fight, probably. He'd always been stubborn, always pushed back against unfairness. But he'd also been practical. He'd known when to fold. I was walking back from a job interview that had gone nowhere when I saw her. Vanessa. She was coming out of a coffee shop 2 blocks from Marcus's apartment. Phone pressed to her ear, laughing at something. She looked happy, relaxed, like she'd already won. I should have kept walking. Should have gone home and called Gloria and taken the plea deal instead. I followed her. She walked 3 blocks to a parking garage, still on her phone. I know, right? God, he was so easy. I just told him I'd found the recording in Dad's things, and he believed me immediately. Didn't even question it. A pause. No, of course I made it. Took maybe 2 hours. There's this AI voice program. You just feed it samples, and it can generate anything. Dad's old voice emails gave me plenty to work with. And Jenna's voice was all over her social media. My heart stopped. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Vanessa laughed again. The best part is, she's going to plead guilty. Roger says she can't afford to fight it, so she'll take the deal and I'll get everything. The house, the accounts, all of it. And she'll have a record, so even if she tries to sue later, good luck finding a lawyer who'll touch it. She reached her car, a black Mercedes that probably cost more than I'd made in 3 years. I have to go, meeting Roger in 20. Yeah, we're filing the final paperwork this week. It'll be official by the end of the month. Okay, love you too. She hung up and got in the car. I stood in the concrete shadow of the garage, my phone clutched in my hand. Her confession saved in my voice. Memos, I had her. The recording was clear. Vanessa, admitting she'd faked the evidence, used AI to generate false audio, manipulated the legal system to steal an inheritance. It was everything I need. I called Gloria immediately. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding distracted. Jenna, I'm in Amin. I have proof. Vanessa faked the recording. She admitted it. I have her on tape. A long pause. What do you mean? You have her on tape? I saw her on the street. I followed her. She was on the phone talking about how she used AI to fake my uncle's voice and mine. She said she made the whole thing up. You recorded her without her nod. Yes, but in Illinois, that's illegal. 2-party consent state. Any recording made without the other person's permission is inadmissible in court and potentially criminal. The garage seemed to tilt, but she confessed to you. Illegally, Jenna? You can't use this. If you try, you could be charged with eavesdropping, and it wouldn't help your case anyway. The judge would suppress it, so she just gets away with it. She commits fraud, and I'm the one who goes to jail. I didn't say that, but you have to be smart about this. If she admitted it once, she might admit it again, in a context where recording is legal-like. Where? Like a conversation where you're a participant and she knows you're there. Illinois allows recording of conversations you're a part of. You just can't record other people's conversations without them know. I thought fast. What if I confronted her, told her I knew the truth and recorded what she said? That could work. If she admits it while talking to you directly and you're recording your own conversation, that's legal. The Jenna, she's not stupid. She'll lawyer up the second you accuse her. Then I won't accuse her. I'll tell her I'm taking the plea deal that I'm giving up. Maybe she'll gloat. Maybe she'll slip. Gloria was quiet for a long moment. That's risky. If she senses you're fishing, she'll shut down. And if you say the wrong thing, you could make your own situation worse. Worse than pleading guilty to a crime I didn't commit. Point taken. Another pause. If you're going to do this, do it soon. And for God's sake, be careful. Don't threaten her. Don't make demands. Just talk. Let her think she's won. I hung up and stared at my phone. At the illegal recording that proved everything and meant nothing, at the choice in front of me, I could take the plea deal, accept defeat, let Vanessa have her victory, or I could gamble everything on one conversation, one chance to get her to admit the truth in a way that actually mattered. Ray's voice echoed in my memory. Family takes care of family, Jenna, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I pulled up Vanessa's number. She'd given it to Roger, who'd passed it, to Gloria, who'd put it in the file. I never called it before, never had a reason to. I typed out a message. Can we talk? I've decided to take the plea deal. I think you deserve to know. Response came 2 minutes later. Fine tomorrow, 2 p.m., the Starbucks on Clark Street. I spent that night rehearsing what to say, how to seem defeated enough that she'd let her guard down, but not so broken that she'd feel suspicious. Marcus listened to my practice runs, offering feedback, worry etched across his face. You sure about this? He asked. Number, but I'm out of options. The next day crawled by. I dressed carefully, picked out clothes that said giving up, rather than prepared to fight. At 1:45, I walked into the Starbucks, bought a coffee I wouldn't drink, and found a table near the window. My phone was in my jacket pocket, voice memo already recording. Vanessa arrived at 2:03, fashionably late, carrying a designer bag that probably cost more than my bail. She sat down across from me, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp. So she said, "You're taking the deal." Yeah, I said, trying to make my voice sound hollow. My lawyer says it's the smart move. Fight it and risk prison or plead out and move on with my life. Vanessa nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the edge of her cup. Probably for the best trials are messy. Expense. That's what everyone keeps telling me. I stared into my coffee. I just wanted you to hear it from me, that I'm done fighting, that you win. She didn't smile, but something flickered in her eyes. Satisfaction, maybe, or relief. It's not about winning, Jenna. It's about justice. My father deserved better than to be manipulated in his final months. The words stung even though I knew they were lies. I forced myself to stay calm, to play the part. I loved him. I know you don't believe that, but I did. I'm sure you loved his money. I let that sit between us for a moment. The Starbucks hummed with afternoon noise, people ordering lattes and typing on laptops, oblivious to the fact that my entire future was balanced on this canvas. Can I ask you some? I said quietly. Off the record, just between us. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. What? Did he really say those things? On that recording, did he really sound like? He didn't want to give me the mun. You were there. You heard it. I heard something, but it didn't sound like the conversations I remember. He seemed so sure when he told me about the will, so clear about what he want. Memory is funny, Vanessa said, especially when there's money involved. People remember what they want to remember. I guess so. I picked at the edge of my cup sleeve. It's just hard to accept that I misread everything so badly that I'd pushed him into something he didn't want. That's usually how manipulation works. The manipulator doesn't even realize they're doing it. I nodded, letting her think she was winning. You're a lawyer, Roger, he said. The recording came from your dad's things, that you found it after he died. That's right. Uncle Ray wasn't really a tech guy. He barely knew how to use his phone. Was it on a voice recorder or some? Vanessa hesitated just for a second. It was in his desk, an old digital recorder he used for note. I never saw him use anything like that. Well, you didn't know him as well as you thought. Her tone sharpened. Look, I didn't come here for an interrogation. You said you were taking the deal. Are you, or was this just a waste of my time? I am. I just needed to understand for my own peace of mind. I looked up at her. You must be relieved that it's almost over. Relieved isn't the word I'd use. Vindicated, maybe. My father left me that money for a reason. He raised me, put me through school, supported me for 30 years. You were around for what? 18 months and you thought that entitled you to ever die. He said you'd already gotten your share. The law school, the house down payment. That was different. That was a father helping his daughter, not some distant niece circling like a vault. The cruelty in her voice made it easier to stay focused. I needed her comfortable, not defensive. You're right. I shouldn't have assumed. I just thought, since he told me about the will himself, that he really meant it. He was confused, sick. You took advantage of that. The will was changed 4 months before he got sick. He was declining for longer than 4 months. You just didn't notice because you were too busy positioning yourself. I took a sip of coffee to buy time. The recording was running, but I needed more than her being cruel. I needed her to slip, to say something that mattered. I keep thinking about that recording, about my voice saying those things. You owe me. I don't remember ever being that direct with him. Well, you were. It's just strange, because I've listened to it maybe 50 times now, and my voice sounds almost too clear, like it was recorded on a better mic than his old phone. Vanessa's expression hardened. What are you implying? Trying? Nothing. I'm just trying to understand how I could forget saying something so harsh. You're in denial. It's natural. Nobody wants to think of themselves as a bad person. She checked her watch. I have a meeting. If you're done soul-searching, I need to go. Just one more thing. I kept my voice soft, defeated. When this is over, when the will is settled and everything's in your name, what are you going to do with it? The house, I mean. Are you keeping it? I'm selling it. I have no interest in living in that dated suburban box. The market's good. I'll probably clear $2 million after fees, and the money from his account. Why do you care? I don't know. I guess I just want to know what he worked for is going to something that matters. He always talked about maybe starting a scholarship fund or something. He thought college should be more accessible. Vanessa laughed, sharp and bitter. A scholarship fund? God, you really had him brainwashed, didn't you? No, Jenna. The money's going to me, to my retirement, my investments, my life. That's what inheritance is. That's what children get from Pan, even when they haven't talked to those parents in over a year. Her eyes flashed. Careful. I'm not trying to start a fight. I just think it's sad that he died alone, and now everything he built is just going to disappear into your portfolio. He didn't die alone. He died surrounded by the consequences of his own choices. If he wanted me there, he shouldn't have picked some stranger over his own dad. I wasn't a stranger. I was family. You were convenient. There's a difference. She stood up. We're done here. Sign the plea agreement. Stay out of my way, and maybe you can move on with your life. Keep pushing, and I'll make sure the prosecutor goes for the maximum sentence. I watched her walk toward the door, my heart pounding. She hadn't confessed. She'd been cold and calculating and mean, but she hadn't admitted to faking anything. The recording I had was just proof that she was a terrible person, not that she'd committed fraud. She was almost to the door when I called out, the AI voice program. How long did it really take? Vanessa froze, turned slowly. What did you say? The voice program. The one you used to make the recording. You told someone on the phone it took about 2 hours. I'm just curious if that's accurate, or if you were round. The color drained from her face, then rushed back red and angry. You recorded me. You followed me and recorded my private conversation. I heard you, I said carefully, talking about how easy it was to fake evidence. How you used Dad's old voicey ales to generate his voice, and my social media for mine. That's illegal. Illinois is a two-party consent state. For recording conversations you're not part of. Yes, but this conversation right now. I'm part of this one, and this one is perfectly legal to record. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table between us. Would you like to tell me again how you found that recording in Dad's desk? Or maybe you want to explain how an AI-generated fake made it past your lawyer's due diligence. Vanessa's hand shook as she pointed at me. You can't use that. Whatever you think you heard, you obtained it illegally. What I heard illegally, yes, but what you tell me right now to my face, while I'm recording our conversation with my full legal right to do so, that's admissible. I kept my voice level. You have 2 options. You can sit down and tell me the truth on the record, and maybe we can work something out, or you can walk away, and I can take what I have to the police, the prosecutor, and every journalist I can find who wants a story about inheritance fraud. They won't believe you. Maybe not, but they'll investigate, and when they do, they'll find the software on your computer. The source files, the cloud backups, the made talk showing when the recording was actually created. You're a lawyer, Vanessa. You know how digital forensics works. She stood there, trapped between the door and the table, her face cycling through expressions. Rage, fear, calculation. Finally, she walked back and sat down. What do you want? The truth. On the record, all of it. And then what you make this dissipate. And then we talk about what happens next. But first, the truth. Vanessa was silent for a long time. The Starbucks continued around us, people living their normal lives, unaware that a confession was happening 3 feet from their caramel macchiatos. Fine, she said finally. Yes, I made the recording. Used an AI program called Voice Clone. It took about 2 hours once I had the source audio. Dad's voice emails, your Instagram stories, some video you posted about your graduation. I fed it all in, wrote a script, and the program generated the convertee. Why? Because he cut me out. Her voice was brittle. Do you know what it's like to spend your whole life being the good daughter, doing everything right, and then watching your father give it all away to someone who barely knows him? He gave you more in that will than he ever gave me in actual love and a 10. He paid for your law school, your wedding, your house. He paid bills. That's not the same as caring. And then you showed up. And suddenly he's laughing again, talking about the future, acting like he has a reason to live. You want to know the truth. I hated you for that, for making him happy when I never could. So you destroyed my life. I protected what was mine. That money, that house, it's my inheritance. It's what I'm owed for being his daughter. You had no right to it. Ray thought I did. Ray was a lonely old man who latched onto the first person who paid attention to him. That doesn't entitle you to his estate. She leaned forward. And honestly, if you'd just accepted a smaller share, if you'd been reasonable about it, maybe none of this would have happened. But you got greedy. You wanted everything. I wanted what he chose to give me. Well, you lost. Even if you go to the police with this recording, even if they investigate, what are they going to find? I used a Buchanan. The software has been deleted, the source files are gone, and it's your word against mine about what was said in some parking garage. You think a jury's going to believe the desperate criminal over the grieving da? I think a jury's going to wonder why you're so confident nothing can be recovered. Digital forensics can find deleted files. Vanessa, they can trace repeating usage, and this recording, the one we're making right now, has you admitting to fraud. I'll recant, say you threatened me, coerce this confession in a public Starbucks with witnesses all around us, while my voice stays calm and yours is shaking with rage. I leaned back. You're not as smart as you think you are. Her jaw clenched. What do you want, Jenna? Money, fine. I'll give you $100,000 to make this go away. Cash, no trail, and you disappear. I want the charges dropped. I want my name cleared. And I want you to admit what you did to the court. Never. Then we're done talking. I reached for my phone. Wait. She grabbed my wrist. Please, if this comes out, I lose my law license. My career is over. Everything I worked for. You should have thought about that before you framed me for elder abuse. I panicked dead, died, and I saw that will. And I couldn't accept it. I couldn't accept that he'd chosen you over me. Tears welled in her eyes. Real or fake, I couldn't tell. I know it was wrong. I know I hurt you, but please, there has to be another way. I pulled my wrist back. The only other way is the truth. You come forward. You admit what you did. You make it right. Maybe the prosecutor shows mercy. Maybe they don't. But you don't get to ruin my life and walk away clean. If I confess, I go to Jade. Maybe you get probation, community service, a suspended license. But that's the consequence of what you did. You don't get to escape it. Vanessa wiped her eyes. You really won't give me another option. You didn't give me one. She sat there staring at the table, her whole body tight with tension. Then she stood up. I need to talk to my lawyer. Don't take too long. I'm giving you 24 hours. After that, I'm going to the police with everything I have. 24 hours isn't enough. Then you better talk fast. She left without another word. I sat alone at the table, my phone still recording, my hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. I'd gotten the confession, gotten her to admit everything, but I had no idea if it would be enough. I called Gloria from the parking lot, played her the recording while sitting in Marcus's car, my voice tinny through the phone speaker. Holy shit, Gloria said when it finished. Jenna, this is huge. This is prosecutable fraud, perjury, falsifying evidence. She's facing serious char. Will they drop my K? They'll have to. You're the victim here, but Jenna, you need to take this to the police right now. Don't wait. If Vanessa gets spooked, she could run or destroy more evidence. I told her she had 24 hours. Forget what you told her. She's a lawyer. She knows how to cover tracks. Go to the police now. I drove straight to the station, asked for Detective Marsh. She came out 20 minutes later, looking tired and skeptical until I explained what I had. Then her expression sharpened. You recorded this to-do an hour ago at the Starbucks on Clark, and she admitted to fabricating evidence. She admitted to everything, using AI, faking the recording, framing me because she wanted the inheritance. It's all there. Marsh took my phone into a back room. I waited in a chair that was somehow both hard and sticky, watching officers come and go, my heart hammering against my ribs. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. When Marsh came back, she had Romero with her. We're going to need you to make a formal statement, and we'll need to authenticate the recording, verify it hasn't been edited. I didn't edit anything. You can check the Mayshard, the file properties, whatever you need. We will. Marsh's expression was neutral, but something had shifted. She was looking at me differently, not like a suspect anymore. MS Colfax, if this recording is authentic and MS Vanessa Colfax confessed to fabricating evidence, that changes everything. But you need to understand that this is going to get complicated. She's a lawyer. She has resources. She's going to fight this hard. I don't care. I just want the truth to come out. They took my statement. 3 hours of questions, going over every detail of my relationship with Ray, the will, the arrest, the conversation with Vanessa. I told them everything, holding nothing back. When I finally left the station, it was dark outside, and I felt hollowed out and exhausted. Marcus was waiting in his car. How'd it go? I don't know. They're investigating. They said they'd be in touch. That's good though, right? They're taking it serious. Maybe Vanessa's already talking to her lawyer and finding a way to discredit everything. We drove back to his apartment in silence. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd done something irreversible. Set something in motion that I couldn't control, for better or worse. The truth was out there now. What happened next was up to forces beyond me. I didn't sleep that night, kept replaying the conversation with Vanessa, searching for mistakes, things I should have said differently, questions I should have asked. But it was done. The recording existed. The police had it. There was no taking it back. The call came at 9 a.m. the next morning. Detective Marsh. Miss Colfax, we've analyzed your recording and compared it to the original evidence. We've also begun the process of obtaining a warrant to search Vanessa Colfax's electronic devices based on our preliminary investigation. We believe there's sufficient evidence to charge her with fabricating evidence and filing a false police report. My knees went weak. What about my office's moving to dismiss? You'll need to appear for a hearing, but it's a formality as of now. You're no longer under investigation. I sat down on Marcus's couch, the phone pressed to my ear, tears streaming down my face. Thank you. Don't thank me. You did the work. You got the confession. A pause. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. We should have looked deeper into that recording from the start. Should have questioned it more. You were doing your job. Yeah. Well, sometimes the job means we get it wrong. She cleared her throat. Someone from the prosecutor's office will be in touch about next steps. In the meantime, try to lay low. Vanessa's going to know we're con. She hung up. I sat there, phone in my lap, trying to process that it was over. The charges were being dropped. My name would be cleared. Vanessa was going to face justice. But Ray was still gone, and the money, the inheritance, the will of that was still tangled up in probate and legal battles that could take years. Even if I won the civil case, even if Ray's wishes were honored, it wouldn't bring him back. Wouldn't give me back the time I'd lost, the reputation that had been smeared, the jobs I'd missed, the nights I'd spent terrified of prison. Marcus came out of his bedroom, saw my face. What happened the charges, going after Vanessa instead. He whooped, pulled me into a hug. Jenna, that's amazing, you did it. I guess so. You guess so, you proved your innocence. You caught her in a lie. You won, it doesn't feel like winning. That's just shock. Give it time. When this settles, you're going to realize how huge this is. Maybe he was right. Maybe later. When the adrenaline faded and reality set in, I'd feel victorious. But right now, I just felt tired. The warrant was executed 3 days later. Police searched Vanessa's home, her office, her devices, Gloria called, with updates as they came in. Gated files recovered from her laptop showing the AI software. Cloud backups of the source audio browser history of searches for how to fake voice recording. And Illinois two-party consent law. The kind of evidence that didn't leave room for doubt. Vanessa was arrested on a Thursday morning. I wasn't there. But I saw the news coverage, her walking into the station with Roger beside her, her expression carefully blank, cameras flashing. The headline read, "Local attorney, charged with evidence tampering in inheritance, dispute." The comments section was brutal. People who'd believed her story about the victimized daughter now turning on her, calling her a fraud, a liar, a disgrace to her profession. The court of public opinion moved fast and without mercy. Part of me felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt sad, because this whole mess, all of this pain and anger and destruction, it came down to a father and daughter who'd never figured out how to talk to each other. Ray had tried to show love through money, and Vanessa had mistaken support for obligation. And when he'd reached out to someone else, she'd seen it as betrayal rather than what it was. Loneliness, seeking calm. The civil case moved forward. Peter Santos, the estate attorney, filed motions to uphold Ray's will. Vanessa's original contest was withdrawn. Hard to argue undue influence when you'd been caught fabricating the evidence, but the probate process still crawled forward at its own pace, grinding through paperwork and procedures and legal requirements that couldn't be rushed. I went back to job hunting, sent out resumes, with a new cover letter explaining the dismissed charges, the false accusations, the vindication. Some employers were understanding, most ghosted me. Having your name attached to an elder abuse case, even one you won, left stains that didn't wash out easily. Marcus let me stay on his couch indefinitely. His parents sent care packages. Gloria worked out a payment plan for her fees, accepting that I couldn't pay until the estate settled. People were kind and I was grateful. But I also felt like a burden, like I'd disrupted everyone's life with my mess. The preliminary hearing for Vanessa's case came 2 months after her arrest. I wasn't required to testify, but I went anyway, sat in the back of the courtroom, and watched her stand before the judge while the prosecutor laid out the evidence, the fabricated recording, the AI software, the confession, the deliberate attempt to frame an innocent person for a crime. The judge set her bail at $75,000, denied Roger's request for electronic monitoring instead of cash bond, spewed the trial for 4 months out. Vanessa didn't look at me as she left the courtroom, her face a mask of studied composure. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was tired. All the fight had gone out of me. I just wanted it to be over. Wanted to move forward, rebuild, start again, but I was stuck in legal limbo, waiting for systems and processes to play out in their own time. Gloria said the estate would likely be settled within 6 months. That Vanessa's criminal case might drag on for a year or more, depending on whether she took a plea deal or went to trial. That I should focus on my own life, on finding work and stability, on healing from the trauma of false accusation and arrest. Good advice. Hard to follow. I finally found a job 3 months after the charges were dropped. Assistant manager at a bookstore, 30 hours a week, fairly above minimum wage. Not what I'd hoped for with my degree, but it was something. Income, purpose, a reason to get off Marcus's couch. The owner, an older woman named Patricia, had asked about the background check results during my interview. I'd explained everything, showed her the news articles about Vanessa's arrest, the dismissal of my charges. She'd listened quietly, then said, "Life's complicated, people make quick judgments. I try not to be one of them. When can you start more?" I'd almost cried right there in her office. The work was simple. Stock shelves, help customers, run the register. I liked the quiet predictability of it. Like talking to people about books instead of legal strategies and evidence. Like feeling normal again, even if it was just for 8-hour shifts, surrounded by paperbacks and the smell of coffee from the cafe next door. Ray would have liked that I was working with books. He'd been a reader, always had a paperback tucked in his jacket pocket. We talked about literature sometimes, treating recommendations, arguing about endings. Those conversations felt far away now, like they'd happened to someone else. The months ground forward. Vanessa's trial date got pushed back twice. The probate case inched along. I signed documents, gave depositions, answered questions from lawyers who all seemed to speak a language designed to obscure rather than clarify. Peter assured me that everything was proceeding normally, that estates this size always took time. I nodded and tried to believe him. Marcus started dating someone, a guy named Tom, who worked in graphic design. They were good together, easy and comfortable. I was happy for him, genuinely. But it also meant I needed to find my own place. Couldn't keep sleeping on his couch while he tried to build a relationship. I found a studio apartment in a building that had seen better days. The landlord was willing to overlook my recent legal troubles in exchange for first and last month's rent plus deposit. It cleaned out my savings, the little I'd managed to rebuild from my bookstore paychecks. But it was mine a space where I could close the door and not feel like I was imposing. I moved in on a Saturday. Marcus and Tom helped, though there wasn't much to move. Some clothes, a few books, a laptop. I'd been living light, not accumulating things, while my life was in flux. The apartment felt empty and echoey, but it also felt like a start. That night, alone in my new place, I pulled out my phone and opened the voice. Memos app scrolled past the recording of Vanessa's confession to an older file, one I'd saved from months before. Ray's voice, a message he'd left back when I was in school. Hey, kiddo, just checking in. Saw you posted about your exam. Hope it went well. Come by this weekend if you have time. I'll make that chili you like. Love you. I played it 3 times, sitting on the floor of my empty apartment, crying quietly. For what was lost. For what had been taken. For all the ways things could have been different if people had just been honest, been kind, been willing to see past their own hurt. Eventually, I wiped my eyes and got up. Mayday met the list of things I needed. Bed frame, dishes, curtains, all the small pieces that turned empty space into home. Tomorrow, I'd go to a thrift store, start building something new from whatever I could afford. Tomorrow. That was the word I'd been living by. Not today, not dwelling on what had happened. Just tomorrow. The next step. The next small victory. The slow, unglamorous work of recovery. But tonight, in the dark and quiet, I let myself remember, let myself grieve, let myself feel all the weight of what Vanessa had stolen. Not just money, though that mattered, but time, trust, peace, the ability to move through the world without wondering if people believe the worst about me. She'd taken that, and even though the truth had come out, even though she was facing justice, I couldn't get those things back. They were gone, spent, used up in the fight to clear my name. That was the real cost, not the legal fees or the lost jobs or the months of terror, but the fundamental shift in how I saw the world, the knowledge that someone could destroy you for nothing more than greed and jealousy, that systems meant to protect could just as easily harm. That truth didn't always win quickly or easily. I'd learned those lessons the hard way, and I'd carry them forward tomorrow. And every day after the estate finally settled 11 months after Ray's death, Peter called on a Tuesday morning while I was reshelving the mystery section. It's done, he said. The court upheld the will, after taxes, fees, and outstanding debts. You're looking at just under $1.9 million. I sat down on the floor between the stacks, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process numbers that still didn't feel real. When funds should transfer within 2 weeks, I'll send you the paperwork today. After he hung up, I stayed there for a while, surrounded by books about murders that got solved and justice that arrives neatly in the final chapter. Real life was messier. The money was coming, but Ray was still gone. Vanessa was awaiting trial, but my arrest record still existed. Dismissed charges or not, I'd won, technically. But winning felt less like triumph and more like survival. Patricia found me there 20 minutes later. UOO, the estate settled. I'm getting the inherits. She nodded slowly. That's good. That's what your uncle want. Nah. I stood up, brushed off my jeans. I should get back to work. Jenna. She put a hand on my arm. It's okay to feel complicated about good news. You don't have to be grateful every sec. I managed a small smile. Thanks. Vanessa's trial started 3 weeks later. The prosecution had offered a plea deal, 2 years probation, community service, restitution of legal fees, and voluntary surrender of her law license. She'd refused, decided to fight it, bet on her ability to convince a jury that I'd somehow coerced her confession, that the evidence was less clear than it appeared. It was a bad bet. The trial lasted 4 days. I testified on day 2, walking through everything. My relationship with Ray, the will, the arrest, the recording. Vanessa's attorney tried to paint me as manipulative, suggested I'd orchestrated the confrontation at Starbucks specifically to trap his client, but the forensic evidence was damning. The deleted files, the AI software, the Maytab showing exactly when the fake recording had posed. Any Price and Tomentort. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, came back with guilty verdicts on all counts. Fabricating evidence, filing a false police report, criminal defamation. The judge scheduled sentencing for 6 weeks out. I wasn't in the courtroom when the verdict was read, couldn't bring myself to go. Gloria texted me the results and I read them standing in the bookstore's back room, surrounded by boxes of new inventory. Guilty, guilty, guilty. 3 words that should have felt like vindication. Mostly they felt like an ending, not happy or sad, just finished. Sentencing day I did attend. Sat in the back row and watched Vanessa stand before the judge, her lawyer making arguments for leniency first offense. Distinguished career, momentary lapse in judgment brought on by grief and family conflict, the prosecutor countered with the calculated nature of the fraud, the sustained effort to destroy an innocent person's life, the abuse of her position as an attorney. The judge listened to both sides, then delivered the sentence. 18 months in county jail, 3 years probation upon release, $50,000 in restitution to cover my legal fees and lost wages, and permanent disbarment, harsher than the plea, deal less than the maximum. Somewhere in the middle where most justice seemed to land. Vanessa's face crumpled as the bailiff led her away. For just a second, she looked at me, not with anger or defiance, but something closer to defeat. A recognition that this was real, that consequences had arrived, that she'd gambled everything and lost. I looked back, didn't smile or nod or offer any gesture of forgiveness. Just looked. Let her see that I was still standing, still here, still whole despite everything she'd done. Then she was gone, and I walked out of the courthouse into afternoon sunlight that felt too bright for the moon. Gloria met me on the steps. "How are you holding up?" "I don't know, it's over." "Right, this is actually the criminal case is over. Civil restitution will take time. But yes, you're done. You can move on. Move on." Everyone kept saying that like it was simple, like you could just decide to stop carrying weight and immediately feel lighter. But I nodded anyway. Yeah, I guess I can. I gave notice at the bookstore 2 weeks later. Patricia understood. "You're meant for more than restocking shelves," she said. "Go figure out what that is." The inheritance had transferred by then, $1.87 million sitting in an account that still had my name misspelled from when I'd opened it at 19. Enough money to change everything, enough money to make Ray's faith in me mean something. I paid off Marcus's parents first. They'd helped with bail, refused to let me worry about paying them back during the trial. Now I could write them a check with a letter thanking them for believing in me when it would have been easier not to. They tried to refuse it. I insisted. Some debts needed to be settled cleanly. Then I paid Gloria's remaining balance, plus a bonus that made her tear up and tell me it wasn't necessary. I told her she'd saved my life, and it was the least I could do. She hugged me and told me to stay out of trouble. I set aside enough to live on for a year. Then I started researching scholarships, grant programs, ways to do what Ray had wanted, make college more accessible, help people who were trying to better themselves but couldn't afford the cost. It took 4 months to set up the foundation properly. Lawyers and accountants and normal-footed paperwork. The Raymond Colfax Education Fund dedicated to supporting non-traditional students pursuing community college and technical degrees, people who were working full-time, raising families, figuring it out as they went, people like I'd been. The first year, we gave out 6 scholarships, $10,000 each, enough to cover tuition and books with some left over for living expenses. I read every application myself, got to know their stories, single mothers going back to school, veterans transitioning to civilian life, people rebuilding after setbacks and mistakes, people who just needed someone to believe they were worth investing in. Ray would have liked that, would have sat in his kitchen with the applications spread out, asking me questions about each candidate, helping me decide. I felt him there sometimes, in those moments not gone, just different, present, in the work, instead of the person. I went back to school myself, enrolled in a master's program for number-footed management. If I was going to run a foundation, I wanted to do it right. Wanted to understand fund development and program evaluation and all the unsexy infrastructure that made good intentions into actual impact. It was hard being a student again after everything, sitting in classes with people who hadn't been arrested, hadn't fought for their innocence, hadn't learned how quickly your life could be dismantled by someone else's lies. But it was also good proof that I could still learn, still grow, still become something beyond the person I'd been during the worst of it. Marcus and Tom got married that spring. I stood up as Marcus's best woman, gave a toast about friendship and loyalty and the people who show up when showing up costs something. Everyone cried, including me, but they were good tears, the kind that meant healing instead of hurt. I saw Vanessa once more after her sentencing. She was being released after serving 11 months. Good behavior, overcrowding, the usual reasons sentences get shortened. I didn't plan to be there, didn't want to see her, but I was driving past the county jail when she walked out, carrying a clear plastic bag of belongings, looking smaller than I remembered. Our eyes met across the parking lot. She stopped. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she looked away and kept walking, disappearing into a waiting car. I sat in my parked vehicle, hands on the steering wheel, trying to sort through what I felt. Not satisfaction at seeing her brought low, not anger anymore. That had burned out months ago, just a kind of distant sadness for how completely she'd destroyed herself for the choices she'd made that couldn't be unmade. For the person she might have been if she'd chosen Diffie, I drove away and didn't look back. The second year of the scholarship program, we gave out 12 awards, the third year 18. The fund was growing, investments doing well, donations coming in from people who believed in the mission. We started adding wraparound support, mentorship, career counseling, emergency grants for students facing unexpected crises. All the things that made the difference between finishing a degree and giving up halfway through. Indeed, I met some of the scholars, heard their stories, watched them graduate and start careers and build lives that worked impossibly hard to achieve. Every single one of them reminded me why the fight had mattered, why clearing my name had been about more than money or vindication. It had been about honoring what Ray had seen in me, the person he'd believed I could become. 5 years after his death, I stood in the community college auditorium where I'd graduated, watching our latest cohort of scholars receive their diplomas. 22 students who wouldn't have finished without the fund's support. 22 people getting a chance they'd earned, but couldn't have afforded, alone. I thought about Ray, about how he'd sat in the same auditorium watching me walk across the stage, proud and teary-eyed in the back row. About how he'd said afterward, "You did good, kiddo. You're going to do a lot of good in this world." I hadn't believed him then, hadn't been able to see past my own exhaustion and student loans and uncertainty, but he'd seen it anyway. Seen something in me worth investing in. And when he died, he'd made sure that investment would keep growing. Vanessa had tried to steal that, had tried to erase his choice, his faith, his final gift. She'd come close to succeeding, but she hadn't. And now his money was doing exactly what he'd wanted, helping people, changing lives, creating ripples of possibility that would extend far beyond both of us. After the ceremony, I drove to the cemetery. Hadn't been in a while. Kept meaning to visit and finding reasons not to, but today felt right. Ray's headstone was simple. His name, his dates, and the line I'd chosen. He believed in second chances. Flowers had been left recently. Probably Marcus. He was thoughtful about things like that. I sat down on the grass beside the marker and told Ray about the scholars, about the foundation, about everything his gift had made possible. I told him about Vanessa too, how she'd served her time and was working as a paralegal, now couldn't practice law anymore, but was apparently good at her job. How we'd never spoken again after that moment in the parking lot and probably never would. How I'd forgiven her not because she'd asked, but because carrying anger was too expensive. How forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, just meant choosing not to let what she'd done define the rest of my life. I told him I missed him, that some days were still hard, that I'd learned things about justice and systems and human nature that I wished I didn't know, but that I was okay. More than okay. I was building something that mattered, something that would outlast all of us. The sun was setting as I stood to leave painting the cemetery in orange and gold. I touched the headstone once, a final goodbye, then walked back to my car. Tomorrow I had a board meeting for the foundation, proposals to review, budget projections to approve, plans to make for expanding into technical programs and apprenticeships. The work Ray had started with one changed will. I was growing into something bigger than either of us had imagined. That was the real inheritance, not the money. Though the money mattered, but the responsibility, the trust, the belief that people were worth investing in, even when, especially when, it cost something. Ray had given me that. And Vanessa, in her attempt to take it away, had only made it stronger. I got in the car and drove toward home, toward tomorrow, toward all the work still ahead. The past was settled. The truth had won. Eventually, in its slow and incomplete way, and I was still here, still standing, still building something, worth build that was enough. That had to be enough, and somehow, most days it was.